Yeah, stuff I received.
Yeah.
All right, I think we'll go ahead and get started. My phone is close to 11 and that clock runs a little slow. So thank everyone for coming this morning. I know it's Monday, it's a 2-hour training, but it's a good opportunity and I think we can capture a lot of people on a Monday morning. So this is on project development process in the KYTC shift, which is strategic highway investment for tomorrow. And I'll let our presenters talk a little bit more about that. But it's primarily focusing on transportation planning, and since the Planning Commission is getting ready to work on the comprehensive plan, we want to update our transportation element, which includes the highway projects. We want to make sure we have a good understanding of how the state projects or state highway planning process works and how do we coordinate that with our local comprehensive planning process. So I'm going to introduce Jeff Moore and Karen Mohammadi. Jeff and Karen are both fellow AICP certified planners. So we've known each other for a long time through the Kentucky Association of Planners. Karen's also a professional engineer. They are both now with Neil Schaefer. Jeff just joined Neil Schaefer after being with the district office in Bowling Green, Highway Department in Bowling Green for 31 years and would you say 5 months? So for a long time, he has a lot of respect around the state as a certified planner working in the transportation field and has had a lot of work in public participation. I think is primarily his emphasis and focus. So he's a great guy and has a lot of information that I think we can use here in Nelson County. Karen is actually a native of Nelson County, is from Bardstown out in Botland. I said Balltown earlier, but Botland. And so her maiden name is Clark, so many of you will know her mom. Carter. I keep getting it wrong this morning.
Carter's daughter.
Barbara Carter, right? So some of you know her. So she's from here and from Nelson County. And she is, as I said, a professional engineer and has worked on many projects throughout the state, and hopefully we can use her expertise as well locally now and with our presentation, and hopefully in the future maybe with some corridor studies and other projects. So I will thank you all for coming and turn it over to them for the presentation.
Good morning. Go ahead and get started. You should have a handout there that follows our slides along. The agenda is going to be something like this. 3 topics. I'm all about what I call the rule of 3. Since y'all are doing the comprehensive plan soon, I'm going to be dropping some little hints, some little ideas for you guys as far as communicating to the public. What I call the rule of 3 is if you give someone a laundry list of things to do, like if my wife says, okay, you need to go to the grocery store, and she rattles off 6 items, I'm not coming home with 6 items. If she gives me 3, I can remember 3. So I like to put my agendas together in 3 items. And here are the 3 points that we're going to cover. Where do transportation projects come from? And that's what I'm going to cover this morning, as well as the SHIFT. That's the new acronym that the Kentucky Transportation Cabinet has put together for the prioritization process for 2017. And I'll talk a little bit about how that prioritization process feeds into, hopefully, projects that are scheduled and funded and actually come to fruition. And then Karen's going to bring up our conclusion here is what is all this information that I presented, what does it mean to you guys here in the home front in Nelson County as far as the role of the Planning Commission in the project identification and development process, especially in the comp plan. Because in your discovery process of the comp plan for the transportation element, you may come up with some transportation needs that need to follow into our process of identification and prioritization. I've only been away from the Transportation Cabinet for a little less than a year, so I will sometimes slip into referring to as us. I still have a strong connection to the Transportation Cabinet, and especially this process, so forgive me on that one. So where do transportation projects come from? I want to give kind of a quick history lesson of how this process came about. In my 30-some years of working in transportation planning, I got to see this process evolve from the ground up. It all started in 1991 with the federal transportation legislation, which is part of the funding mechanism federally for transportation projects across the country. Not only is it the funding mechanism, it also sets the tone of how transportation is going to be developed across the country with some sort of standard. With this act in 1991, which was called ICE-T, the Intermodal Surface Transportation Efficiency Act of 1991, It was looking at the states and saying, listen, we have been pouring lots of money towards you all. We have just finished the interstate highway system. So the national mandate for a project that we can kind of coalesce on as far as transportation, that has already been accomplished. So what's the next step? So in ICE-T, the language in that piece of legislation from the feds basically said, thou shalt make certain that what you are spending your transportation dollars on is what is the transportation needs. And out of that legislation, there was a lot of discussion about how to do planning, how to do what we call local official consultation. Kentucky took that very strongly to heart. Most of our transportation planning had been kind of sidelined a little bit as the interstate highway system had come to fruition here in the state. And so this kind of breathed new life back into our planning process and said, okay, you will go out into communities and you're going to identify what their transportation needs are. And then you're going to find out from them what their priorities are on those transportation needs. Remember that laundry list? Basically, you want to kind of narrow it down to a manageable list that you can kind of rally behind. So in 1993, the Transportation Cabinet decided, listen, we only have a few planners scattered throughout the state in our transportation district offices. Most of them are data collectors. They're collecting traffic counts. They're collecting some of our inventory information on new routes. They're really not doing planning. So we need to see who's out there in the trenches already discussing with the local officials and with the communities at large, what are their transportation needs. So we became what I call the three-legged stool. We pulled two more partners in. That's the area development districts. Each of the area development districts have transportation planning staff. You all are in the Lincoln Trail area development district, which is based out of Elizabethtown. You have a transportation planner. Their role is to make certain this local consultation, which is still in the federal legislation ever since 1991, that process is being done. Then you also have metropolitan planning organizations. We have 9 of those now in the state. Bowling Green and Elizabethtown are the 2 newest ones. Those are the 2 new kids on the block that came through in the 2000 census. Basically, a metropolitan planning organization is a formalizing of a transportation planning process in communities that have an urbanized population of 50,000 or greater. We have 9 of those across the state. And they have what I call deliverables. They have specific plans that they have to put together. They have a unified work program that pretty much defines what they're going to do every year. That has to be approved by the state and also by the feds. They also have their long-range transportation plan, and then what they call their STIP, their Surface Transportation Improvement Program, which are those projects that are already scheduled and funded. Those 3 documents have to be produced by that MPO. The area development districts, they're handling the rural transportation planning process that's going on. Not nearly as stringent, but they do have to follow the federal transportation legislation language about local consultation. So we put together this 3-legged stool, and then every 2 years, in coordination with the identification of projects to go on our, what I will historically refer to as our 6-year highway plan, where projects actually are funded and scheduled and move forward, we would do a prioritization. Basically, it's in the odd year. The even year is when that 6-year highway plan is submitted to the General Assembly and to the governor for their approval and put into that budget. It takes about a year of prep work, and we are right in the middle of that, and I'll go into the process that we're doing right now with SHIFT, where that 3-legged stool is very, very activated. That conversation is very lively right now about identifying those projects that are very, very important to us that need to be funded and scheduled next onto that 6-year highway plan, or some people now call it the State Highway Project Plan. So where do these projects initially come from? They come from the unscheduled needs list. We refer to it as the UNL. I like to refer to it as the universe of possible needs. It's this huge wish list out there. It's about $65 billion worth of projects. Anything anybody could have dreamed up about transportation out there as a transportation need at one time goes on the UNL. That's our big grocery list that my wife sends me to the grocery store for. Then we've got to go through prioritization and whittle it down to manageable bites that we can remember and we can focus on. So UNL, the universe of all possible needs. So during prioritization, which happens every 2 years, as I said, and we're in the middle of the 2017 one right now, in that prioritization process, we are looking at that entire universe of needs regionally, working with the area development districts, the MPOs, and the transportation cabinet districts, and looking at their specific piece of the UNL regionally. And then they are looking at the priorities. How do we prioritize these projects? And as time has passed, it's become more complicated, but not necessarily in a bad way. It's given us better products at the end of the prioritization. One of the visuals that was created back early in the days when we were trying to wrap our heads around how this process works, Mike Hancock came up with this visual. He was our state highway engineer for planning there for a while, and then became our state highway engineer, and then finally our secretary of transportation. A lot of respect for Mike, and Mike was always great about drawing pictures, things that people can wrap their minds around. That's another one of those things that you can take with you in the comprehensive plan. Not only do you want to make certain that your lists are short and digestible, the information that you're presenting is digestible to the public, you also want to use a lot of visuals, a lot of pictures that they can latch onto and go, wow, I understand that. So what Mike was saying here, he says, the way our process works is like you're funneling. You start out here with this huge list, that universe of projects, that's $65 billion worth of projects, over about 2,200 projects, I believe, statewide. They all kind of go into this funnel. And what you're trying to do is narrow down the focus. You have a district transportation plan process. This is now called the SHIFT process. It's had a variety of different names. We just, in general, call it our prioritization process. So SHIFT is the new acronym. From that process and all that input, we then develop our state recommended highway plan, which goes to from the transportation cabinet to the General Assembly and the governor, and for them to chew on it during their even year meeting, the legislative session. And then out of that, you have an approved state highway plan. That approved state highway plan has projects broken down in phases. If you've taken a look at the state highway plan, and it is on our website, the KYTC website, you can go to that website and you will look, and out beside the projects, it's broken into phases, and those phases have years as far as timing, and they also have money amounts. The phases are planning, design, right-of-way acquisition, utility relocation, and finally, and hopefully, construction. And at the end of this funnel, you have a delivered improvement. That hopefully matches the transportation need that began at the top of the funnel. You follow it? A very great visual. We've refined it. It's in our long-range transportation plan. We share it over and over again, and it's probably the best way for us to kind of wrap our heads around, as well as the community's heads around, where do projects come from? What gives this funnel its shape are three things right here. It's knowledge-driven. You're going to have technical, public, and political input, and that's what's kind of forming the decision-making that's making that funnel take that huge universe of needs and narrow it down to hopefully a delivered project. As I mentioned, the input. This is also out of the KYTC 2014 statewide transportation plan, long-term transportation plan. This visual explains the input. Where does it come from and what is it used for? And it's like a piece of a pie. You can't have one without the other. You have the political input, you have technical input, and the public input. The technical input, this is where my engineers and planners, this is where they can really, really get into the dirt, into the weeds. They understand this. It's the existing conditions. It's future scenarios or trends, your traffic counts and your traffic count projections, environmental impacts, bugs, bunnies, blooms, water, air, the human environment, historic structures, cemeteries. That's tactile. That's something they can touch. That's something we can go out and we can see. We can see how the system is working, and then we can kind of project that forward. That's that technical input. The district offices and the central office of KYTC, and then also that kind of pour into the technical input, you have affected state and federal agencies. They'll be kind of chiming in on projects. And then, of course, this is all governed by the federal transportation bill at the time. When this was done, that transportation bill was called MAP 21. So you've got technical input. Another piece of this pie is the public input. One of the things that scared our engineers and planners at the KYTC district offices was their lack of training with dealing with the public. The local official consultation was going to be scary enough. You mean I've got to get from behind my desk and go out and talk to somebody and say, okay, what is it you want? What is it you want your transportation system to do that it's not doing? Or what is it you visualize it should be doing in the next 20, 25 years? So public input was something, as we were developing our prioritization process, was something that we started training our staff to really get involved and embrace. There are lots of what I call conduits of capturing that input, so it's just not coming at you scattered. It could be someone just writing a letter, an email, actually coming up to you at a meeting and saying, hey, this is a transportation need. Or it can come through a variety of official sources, such as the MPO, which has to have a public participation plan. The area development districts, which also have to have a public participation plan. How do you capture these comments, and then what do you do with them? Public meetings, visioning, charrettes, all of that information is part of that public involvement, that public input. That goes into the process. That helps kind of form that funnel. And then the political input. It was so funny when we first started this process, people were saying, well, we want to depoliticize the process. It's like, you really can't do that. If you notice, all three of these pieces of the pie are equal and are very important. This political input is at local level because of our local official consultation, but it's also at state and at a federal level, okay? We've got to have this information here. We've got to have the political input. We've got to find out what the officials, the community leaders, both at a local, state, and then also at a federal level, what is their vision for the transportation system? Not only do we need to know their vision, we also need to know the financial reality. No one has that foremost in their mind than the political realm, because they're the ones having to pass the budgets. So this political input is as important as the technical and public. So you've got to kind of balance all of these together and make certain that you are collecting them all equally. So we started out like a house on fire in 1993 and said, we got this. We can go out to our communities, find out what their transportation needs are, put them all on the list. Every 2 years, we'll sit down and we'll meet and we'll figure out, okay, what are their high priorities, what are their medium priorities, what are their low priorities, and then let's develop a regional top 10 list and some localized top 10 lists so we know how to feed into our 6-year plan, our state highway plan. Well, that worked for about 3 or 4 cycles. And then things happened on the political end of things, the financial end of things. Think of the time period, 1993 to 1999. The economy across the country was a house on fire. Money was flowing. Fuel prices were pretty decent. Then in 1999, the General Assembly came to the governor and said, listen, we've got this huge universe of transportation needs. We've got to start whittling through. Let's pass a fuel tax. Let's go ahead and increase the fuel tax. We haven't done it in a while, and take care of these projects. Well, the governor said, okay, that sounds fine. Let's try to do that. This was toward the middle of 1999. The General Assembly said, let's do 7 cents. The governor said, let's be conservative and we'll do 5 cents. And so he tells the Transportation Cabinet, do your prioritization and consider, as you're putting your plan together, that increase of about 5 cents per gallon. So we put that plan together, we, the Transportation Cabinet, did. By the time 1999 started rolling down, gasoline, which at that time had been running under $1 a gallon, spiked to a whopping $1.43 to $1.50 across the country. All of a sudden, the discussion about the fuel tax fell off the table. But in the meantime, the Transportation Cabinet had put together a 6-year highway plan with all these projects in anticipation of this additional revenue. So they were like, okay, we've already got this plan together. The General Assembly and the governor are going to have to work this out. So what happened in 1999 was, well, this little downturn in the economy, this increase in fuel prices, maybe it won't last very long. We're going to come back to this discussion in 2002 when the next General Assembly was going to meet, because this was gearing up for the 2000 General Assembly. And so they passed, without any adjustments, that 6-year highway plan and actually added projects to it. What then happened is it became unstable. Mike Hancock referred to it as unsustainable. So we would now spend from 1999 or 2000 when the 6-year highway plan was passed till today trying to work our way through this kind of over-programmed 6-year highway plan, working our way through that. And we're still working through it, but since then, lots of hits have happened. We had 2001, 9/11. We had the economic downturn in 2008. We've had a reduction in fuel income, fuel tax income revenues. And we've also had, but also an increase in fuel efficiency. So those are kind of combating against each other. So this set the stage of, okay, our prioritization's got to be more realistic. It's got to be more realistic. There are more than 1,400 projects in the state highway plan, and we're trying to work through them. Only half of them are even partially funded. And most of those are with federal dollars. And that, the Federal Highway Trust Fund, that funding is also kind of what we call wobbly. It's not in great shape. So what happens? You see these projects that have been lingering on this 6-year highway plan, state highway plan, for years, trying to work their way through funding. And it starts to undermine the public's trust. You've got this huge list, and projects are just sitting there. They're kind of moving along a little bit as they find what I call change in the sofa. But for the most part, they're creeping along. They're not being done effectively. And the public's like going, listen, that project's been on that 6-year highway plan for a decade. You know, where's the 6-year highway plan? So with that, we started playing with our prioritization process. We said it's got to be data-driven. We go back to that technical input. We got to also, some of the new legislation that came out with MAP 21 and then its successor dealt with performance measures. If I'm going to spend X number of dollars on a transportation project, it better give me some return on investment, ROI, okay? And what is its performance? If it's a safety project, then it should reduce the number of crashes, right? That should be the equation. So there was lots of discussion about performance measures. And then how do we take our prioritization process and these performance measures, these things that we want to accomplish with our transportation system, and mesh them together so that our decision making makes sense. So last prioritization, the last one I was involved in before I retired in 2015, we started playing with, I called it the black box. It was a formula. We looked at other transportation cabinets, DOTs, Departments of Transportation, state ones, across the country and said, how are you handling this issue? Because it's probably just not unique to Kentucky. There are a lot more transportation needs than there's funding. How do you make those decisions intelligently and data-driven so that at the end of the process you can say, yes, this is how I measured my performance. So we went through that process in 2015 with an experimental thing that we called the black box. All the projects were kind of run through this formula in this black box and came out with a score. That scoring information was handed down to us in the district, at the MPOs, and then also at the area development district while we did our prioritization, so we can look at, okay, how is our prioritization, our selection, matching up with what the data is telling us. It needed a lot of refinement, and we knew that even going into it, but it was better than nothing. And so we started looking back at the states that had formulaic processes, and we said, okay, we need to refine our black box. And out of the black box came what we call SHIFT, Strategic Highway Investment Formula for Tomorrow. When I was putting this presentation together, it's like, you know what? The highway is understood. Probably the acronym should be SIFT, because that's what we're doing. We're sifting through all these transportation needs and trying to figure out, you know, what are those 3 things I've got to get at the grocery store? Does that make sense? That's what we've got to do here with SHIFT. And we've got to do it intelligently with the data that's out there for us. Shift is also setting the stage with the conversation for the public of saying, yes, we understand we were over-programmed. We understand there's also a backlog of transportation projects that have occurred since 2000 that need to be addressed. So we're trying to build that conversation, build that trust, and get the public invested in this to understand there's only a certain amount of funding over here available. We've got to fill that gap somehow. And this is probably going to happen in the upcoming General Assembly with the governor and the General Assembly having a discussion of how do we fill that income gap that we have, that resource gap. So Shift is going to give us a very realistic view of what our priorities are. It captures that technical input through a formulaic process, but it also has the public and the political input poured into it also. Pretty much it has 5 key elements. 1, it is data-driven. We, those of us who have worked with the transportation cabinet since the early 90s have watched the evolution. We had one PC in my office when I first started. That was for the secretary to use as far as word processing. By the time I left, we all had PCs, and we were all connected to the internet, and we were just flooded with all kinds of data to help us make good decisions. Because of that ability now, we can do things like Shift. We can look at projects and gather data based on what's going on out there and then project it forward and come up with almost mathematical equations that help us make decisions on what needs to happen next. What is the next transportation piece of the puzzle, of that infrastructure puzzle that needs to be laid down? It's objective. It takes out that I really like this project, or what I would often hear is like, that's a really good project. All 1,400 of those are really good projects. Good is not quantifiable, okay? So it takes that and puts the objectiveness in it. It says, okay, it's not so much value, is it good or is it a bad project? Because we all probably look at them and go, well, they're all good to a certain extent. What it gives us is the ability to say which one needs to happen next. It's transparent. As I said, the public and local officials are being involved in this process. This presentation that I'm giving here has actually been trotted out to the area development districts, the NPOs, across the board at every major conference that we've had here recently to talk about Shift and how it's really going to revolutionize the way that we make our transportation decisions. It's collaborative. Remember my 3-legged stool? Didn't throw it away. It pulled those 3 legs together even tightly. And then it's pulled other partners together too to make that collaboration to come up with something that will be something we can stand on. My analogy of the 3-legged stool. That collaboration gives us something solid we can stand on. Said, listen, all voices are being heard here. And it's dependable. It's a algorithm. You know, Sheldon would love this, any of you Big Bang Theory fans out there, because it is math, okay? It is a lot of math, but it has that balance of the math with the people skills. You know, we love Sheldon, he can do the math all day long. People skills, not so much. So Shift combines people skills with the math to give us something that's very, very dependable. So, what are the top priorities? What is that list I've got to go to the grocery store? When we're looking at the projects, we want to measure them across these top priorities and see how well they perform. 1, foremost with transportation is to improve safety. 2, preserve the existing infrastructure. It's called asset management. You know, we don't want to go out there and just build new stuff all the day long. We want to go and take care of what we have. A good analogy is, I'm going to take care of my house. I want it to last as long as possible. I want to do the maintenance for it. Because I don't want to run out there and go, you know, I've let my house slide. I didn't preserve it. So I just got to go over here and buy a new one. We can't do that in the transportation world. We just can't build brand new roads and let the other ones slide off. So you've got to have that, preserve the existing infrastructure. asset management, because we've invested a lot over a time being. You hear a lot of discussion about our interstate highway system. It's over 50 years old. I can feel its pain. I'm over 50 years old, okay? It's under a little bit of stress. So we've got to take care of these great things that we've built. And yes, we probably need to build some more things, but we also need to make certain that we are building it on the backs of the infrastructure that we've invested so heavily in. Reduce congestion. Getting from point A to point B, not only safely, but on time. This is especially important in this day and age when I go click my mouse and wait on the front porch for my delivery from Amazon. Okay? We want it right then. So congestion is very, very important, not only for me to get to my job or to the hospital, but also for that whatever widget I ordered on Amazon to get to my house. So it's not only people, it's freight. Fuel economic growth. We want to make certain that we put our state and our region and our nation in a position where we can move people and goods effectively and safely. Okay, and that we can open up areas that may not have access real well. That's part of fueling economic growth. And then spending tax dollars wisely. All right, we invested a huge amount in this project. Did we get that benefit from it? Is it safer? Did it reduce congestion? Did it build on the existing infrastructure so we didn't have to go out here and build something completely brand new? And did it give us jobs? Were jobs created, not only during the construction of the project itself, but in the long term? Did it give Bardstown a better connection in the world to move its goods or to have access to its services? So these priorities become kind of the cogs within the machine that is Shift, the formula. You have safety, asset management, that's the system preservation, economic growth, benefit and cost, and then congestion. And they all kind of swirl around each other. Now, the projects that run through Shift, as I said, we just kind of take this big box and we pour it in. A box of projects, and we poured it into the black box in 2015. We did that with a lot of projects. Some of the things the black box processed pretty well. Some other projects, not nearly as well. So we set up, okay, there are some projects that can go through Shift really well and give us the information we need, and some projects that are outside the Shift process. The projects that are included are safety improvements, those spot improvements out there, that intersection reconstruction, that blind curve that needs to be dealt with, that hill. Road widening, that could be just adding a little extra pavement, a little shouldering, to all the way of going from a 2-lane to a 4-lane. Reconstruction, that's fairly decent size reconstruction. It's not a spot improvement. That's where you're going out there and you're reconstructing several miles of roadway to take care of some sort of alignment issue, a hill or a curve. New interchanges. Remember me saying access. Access helps economic growth. So new interchanges that can help with your system's ability to move traffic and then to provide access to areas of your community that needs that access to grow or flourish. And then new routes, brand new roadways. A, B, and C. You might have these 3 communities, but you really need a route that gets you from A to C, but there's nothing there. So that's a new route, that kind of thing, a bypass, or I like to refer to them as connectors that are getting you from one point to another. One of the local discussions you all are going to be having is that Southwest connector, is that new route that gets one end of your community to another end of the community, providing access. Under each of these priorities, each of these little cogs, there are questions. This mechanism, or they're asking these questions. How many crashes under safety? How frequent are the crashes? How does it compare to similar roads? It does a formula, looking at the type of crashes, the amount of traffic, and then how does it compare with similar type of roadways throughout the state and throughout the country? Does the roadway design impact numbers, frequencies of crashes? Are there some alignment issues? Is there a curve that everyone misses, or an intersection that has limited sight distance? Congestion, how many vehicles are on it daily? And what does the value impact the service level, what we call level of service, the ability for that facility to move traffic through there. And it may be, yeah, it moves traffic great at 5 o'clock in the morning, but an hour later at rush hour for about 45 minutes, it's complete gridlock. Okay, so we not only look at it through a 24-hour lens, we also look at it during the peaks and see what's going on. Economic growth. What is the potential for job growth in the area? Okay, or is the inability to access a roadway to get freight in and out of that community, is that hampering job growth in that area? Accessibility, connectivity, and economic competitiveness. What's the daily traffic volume? And then part of that volume, you're going to be looking not only at cars, but you also need to look at your daily freight traffic. Travel cost. How much travel time can be saved? If this is a very heavily congested roadway and it takes me 45 minutes to travel 3 miles, like Scottsville Road and Bowling Green, if any of y'all have enjoyed that, is there something I can do to decrease that travel time and therefore increase savings to the traveler? Okay, all of a sudden that is money back in my pocket because I'm not late for work. That is less fuel that's being used because my car is moving as opposed to just sitting idling at one of several traffic lights. So that type of thing. What is the financial value of that time savings? And it varies from community to community. How much could be saved by reducing crashes? Because a crash not only has a life cost, it can also have a financial cost to all of us. If a community is experiencing a lot of crashes, and you see AAA every once in a while put out, these are the top dangerous intersections in the country, or these are the communities that have the worst traffic crashes, that's really hard to market your community if you end up on that list. And plus, it means that your community may be paying higher insurance premiums because of that. And then what is the project cost itself? Okay, if we're going to build this facility, is it worth it? Is it going to give me a return on my investment? And then asset management, back to the preservation. What can we, instead of rebuilding it completely, can we just repair the surface? Or just, shore up that bridge rather than build a great big brand new one, maybe take care of the one that you've already got. And then of course, part of asset management is we're going to be looking at the bridges and overpasses, the structures, and saying, okay, what is their life? Are they in, I don't want to say in danger of falling down, but are they in need of a little assistance, a little help? And then there's a ranking. There's a bridge scoring that goes on out there where all of those bridges, all those structures are investigated, they're inspected, and then they come back out and say, okay, here's the score. So it gives you a numerical quantity here that you can plug into this equation and say, okay, this bridge, it's scoring not so great. Usually it's on the score of 100. It may be a 50, and this bridge is a 70. So when you put that in the equation, this project with the bridge that's a 70, maybe it can wait a little while, but this one over here that's a 50 or 35, maybe not so much. So how does SHIFT deal with the financial issue? Well, looking at what comes out of SHIFT as far as the scoring, they're looking at dividing it into this kind of pie. And a statewide funding formula would be created, looking at that project. So much of it would be 20% toward congestion, 20% toward economic growth, 20% before benefit costs, 15% toward asset management, and 25% towards safety. So it's pretty even here, but safety, which is our foremost concern, is weighted a little heavier. So you look at it from a statewide lens, but you also then start looking at it at a proposed regional lens. As this information starts bubbling up to us at the Transportation Cabinet from a local level into a regional level, and then up to the statewide level. And then these change a little bit. At a regional level, the district gets involved, and they have 15%. They're able to add or subtract points toward a project. And then local also can say, okay, here's a project that's scored. I've got so many points I can add to that project because it's very, very important to my community. That's something new that we did not have in the black box. This gives us the ability to horse trade. You know, you're getting in your groups and you're saying, look, all right, yes, this project didn't score really well, but we need this project. This is the next piece of the puzzle that needs to be laid down for our community's transportation infrastructure. I'm going to use my points that I can use for any of these projects all on that project or on a pair of projects or whatever. The district highway office, they have points also that they will deal with. So that's where that input, that political and that public input starts to come into play. So I touched on this briefly, but I think it's important enough to realize that this is a cycle that's continuing all the time. The minute that we got done with prioritization, it felt like we started working toward the new prioritization. Also, what would happen during prioritization is we would discover new transportation needs. They may not be pressing, but if it was pressing, we had to figure out how to jostle into the list for prioritization, but there might be some new transportation needs that we have in discovery that we need to go ahead and put into the next list. So we would already start working toward the next prioritization. So the 2017 prioritization, as it said, it is underway. And it's underway using the SHIFT process. Is SHIFT perfect? No. But having gone through probably about a dozen of the prioritizations over the years, we've always been tweaking them. And that is the beauty of this process. It's not rigid. There's always, we go to it and say, hey, we need to add a little something here, or there's some sort of new federal or local or state initiative that needs to be addressed in this process. So it's very, very fluid, it's very open, and that's a great thing because it helps with that pie, the different inputs, public, political, and technical. It makes you more reactionary to it. So here's the funnel. This is our goal, is to come out with an approved state highway plan. By this time next year, we hope to have one of those. And we'll be starting to work on those projects that get funded and scheduled. But there's a lot of work that has to be done between now and then. Like I said, we're in the middle of the prioritization process. They're running it through. I think they're doing the locals and the regionals right now, doing the kind of the horse trading that I mentioned. Then what happens is all that information is then given to the central office, and they start developing the statewide plan, that draft plan. It becomes the governor's plan because we'll send it over there through the secretary. Secretary will meet with the governor through the end of this year and the beginning of next year and figure out what his priorities are in that plan. They will have obviously a discussion of how to finance that plan. And then that plan then goes to the General Assembly. And as part of the budget process, they start working through it. So that will happen right here. About January. January, that plan goes from KYTC to the governor's office. The governor's office is General Assembly. And then the General Assembly, by the time they dismiss in April, will hopefully have us an enacted highway plan. And then we start working on those projects. Something that I did not mention in here, but really underlines the issue that we have as a state, as far as funding, is the pause 50. That all state-funded projects just stopped. And then this coming fiscal year, there's $50 million available across the state for state-funded projects. That's across the state, over 120 counties. That's really, really low. So the pause 50, what that did, it's kind of like when your computer is doing nastiness and you're sitting there going, what do I do? And you do the Control-Alt-Delete. It was the KYTC Control-Alt-Delete. We had to stop. There wasn't enough funding to go forward. We had to stop, and it got everyone's attention. Said, listen, we can't continue kicking the can down the road. We're going to have to adjust our process. So, shifting Kentucky ahead, and that's why they've got this acronym, is we are making this shift away from the way we used to do prioritization to a new way that's very data-driven, very performance measured. We want to make certain that we communicate well with the entire state about why this approach is important. It's data-driven. The numbers, you can use the numbers, but it also takes into consideration the desires of the community, their vision, which you can't quantify. Those aren't numbers. It will help us establish clear priorities across the state for transportation. It will invite input at the district and local level, as I said, the kind of the horse trading with the points. It will provide that transparency. I know one of the things that I heard back in the winter was the Transportation Cabinet was going to rely very heavily on their public information officers and then their public affairs office to really roll out this message. And they've been doing that. They've been going out to the public and those specifically involved in this process of prioritization and saying, here's what's happening, here's why it's different, and how we have to change our business model. And then what we want is to deliver a reliable, dependable plan for our businesses and our citizens. We've not been doing that. It's been working, just not working very, very well. And it's getting to the point, as we saw with the Pause 50, it's breaking down. And then we want to create confidence for future federal, state, and infrastructure investment. It's all about that return on investment. When you look at that project and say, you know what, that project made my community's life better. I can get to my job on time. My kids I know are going to get safely to school. My stuff that I ordered from Amazon is going to be on my front doorstep when I get home. That's what people are wanting to know. I was in charge, I was one of the co-managers when we wrote our statewide transportation long-range plan from 2012 to 2014. A state DOT has to do that every 6 or 7 years. And that was the story that I told the team that we need to tell. Why is transportation important? We have to make it, why is it important to me personally? And that's the way we wrote the plan. And then we took that story and said, okay, that's important to you. I understand that. So that means we need to take a lot of care in feeding for this process. We need to make decisions very, very well, and they need to be based off of data and not just purely gut feeling sometimes. So, with that, I'll take questions because we're heading into the next half of this. I threw a lot of information out at you guys. Yes?
Not a question, maybe just a comment. I've served on the regional transportation planning process for several years, and really the system worked back in the 90s because we kept that unscheduled needs list just as it was, unscheduled needs.
Yes.
Then from 1999 to whatever year we are, somewhere along that line, all these unscheduled needs started getting dumped into the 6-year road plan inappropriately in many cases. So there's where you're balancing the amount of your dollars came into play, and the state was not disciplined enough to allow that original plan that we had of keeping 1 or 2 projects per county, and then build up a regional list of priorities. And so really the system was at fault. And we were doing a lot of this stuff, not on paper, but we were prioritizing based on needs and service and so forth. It just wasn't all written down on paper. Right. But it really messed us up when we took all those unscheduled needs lists and started dumping them in for political purposes, yes, more than anything.
Here.
Yeah.
Well, and I don't want to say there are no bad guys in that decision in 99, because you have to look at it in the frame of reference in 99. I had a conversation, Kirsten Jaggers was the Area Development District Transportation Plan at the ad, and she and I were going around and we were in the middle of our prioritization. It was probably the 96 prioritization, and we were like, look, last time we got this project and this project and this project on the 6-year plan. They're funded, they're moving forward. This is great. Kirsten was like, yay, and I'm like, wait. I said, see that? And we drove by a gas station. I said, gasoline is 89 cents a gallon. She said, yeah. I said, what happens if that goes to $2? Of course, she almost hit the ditch. I said, but as a responsible planner, I said, we need to be working with our communities and saying, good times they never last forever. Bad times never last forever. We've got to be very intelligent about our decision making, and intelligent not necessarily just a little smart, but be forward thinking. Have a couple of scenarios in your back pocket. Well, what happens if the economy turns around and we go like gangbusters and the revenue stream opens back up and we have buckets of money? We've got all these projects over here ready to go. That's a good thing. But what happens if something erupts globally that disrupts the market, which we saw happen again and again and again since '99? We've got to prepare ourselves for that. And what this process has been trying to work toward is giving us that framework to make those decisions, as far as not feeling good in the moment and going, I can ask for everything for Christmas because Dad's got a bonus and got a big job and all that other stuff. I call it if you've seen Christmas Vacation, the jelly of the jelly of the month club. Okay.
You got the pool.
Yeah, I just ordered the pool and I got jelly of the month club.
Yeah, we meet. I meet with the city. Jessica's on that committee, and we've already had our local meetings, and we come to conclusions that are all good for the whole community as a whole. And so that part of the system's been real good.
Yes.
But the real nuts and bolts of it is you have too many projects.
Yes.
And they need to take some of those projects out of the 6-year road plan and move them back to the unscheduled needs list and fund what's important.
And no one was, every cycle, no one has been brave enough to do that. Because how do you pick that? And hopefully by having something that gives us some numbers.
Well, to be honest with you,
That might
public
help.
input sometimes hurts
Yes.
more than it helps. And I've stated that at our district meetings on that.
And that's why I noticed with this, I was like, yes, you go with this.
You can ask all these people in this room, what highway project would you like to see in the 6-year road plan, and the importance of it. And there's probably 10 or 12 different highway
Right.
projects that would go in there, and they're all great projects.
Yeah, they're all good.
Like you said.
They're all good.
Discipline. That's
Yeah,
the
it's a
state does not have the
discipline.
discipline.
And we just haven't had that discipline. Hopefully this will help us. If we've got some numbers to give us discipline, that will help us making the process more stiff. Because in the early days, it was you took all your projects on the unscheduled needs list, you added up the total funding of what that was worth, and a third of that funding was your high priorities, a third was medium, and a third was low. And then you would go through and you picked up your top 10 local projects and your top 10 regional projects. So of course, at that time, we didn't have the tools to really make a lot of good decisions. And we played with those tools since then. And the data, being able to access that, that's going to help us too. Because we can say, if we take care of this project here, this is going to eliminate or attempt to eliminate X number of crashes. Or this will help me with my congestion on this issue. Or this will move these trucks from going through downtown to another route to get to whatever interchange they're trying to access. So yeah, it's having watched this evolve, but I scared Kirsten to death when I said, you never just prepare for the good times. It's never going to last forever. You've got to start asking hard questions. And we never really forced ourselves to ask hard questions because we always thought it'll get better. But what happened was it got worse.
And in relation to what you were just saying too, how the fuel tax with fuel efficiency standards going up every year, but population growth going up every year, and you have more drivers on the road, does that offset the loss in that fuel tax because cars get 35 miles a gallon now and don't need as much gas, but you have more drivers? I mean, is there a balance there?
Well, and then there's a lot of debate going on nationally. Do we have actually more drivers? Because we're looking at the millennials and their driving behavior right now, especially they're living in the urban areas where there's transit. And that's a whole other model to deal with because that's not funded real well. But they're demanding transit. And then another term that can fall into this equation that's going to be a question mark is autonomous vehicles. You're talking about fuel efficiencies. When you get autonomous vehicles where vehicles are moving in fleets and they're linked together, that's going to increase fuel efficiencies even more. So yeah, there's a lot of discussion now about we had gone to a fuel tax. That was our model. Maybe that's not the way we pay for transportation. There's a lot of discussion about that. And hopefully by having something like this, of being able to have that discipline that we haven't had before of what we really, really need, as opposed to my wife saying, I need all these things. No, I need 3 things. Go get them. That's what we need to have, because the future is changing very, very rapidly and very uncertain. That's our big concern here. So what can we do today to position ourselves tomorrow to make better decisions? But yeah, it's the jelly of the month club. You know, it was like, oh, you know, I'm off the pool. It's like, oops, I didn't get the bonus.
Yeah.
So I have a question. With E-Town and Hardin County becoming the MPO, did that open up more money for our region?
It opens up money. Well, small MPOs, what it gives them is it gives them funding to do planning.
Okay.
It doesn't really give them more project
No project
money.
money.
You have to jump, I call it jump the broom to MSA, which is or TMA, which is 200,000, which is like Lexington and Louisville and Bowling Green and E-Town are still a ways off from that. And we wouldn't want to see that rapid growth in a decade. So it gives you funding to do that really formalized planning, to produce those 3 documents I said, the work program, your STIP, which are your funded and scheduled projects, and then also your long-range transportation plan. So it really didn't open us up for just for planning. Yes?
As you're doing your large picture planning, is there a way in your model where you're reflecting an environmental component, or is that too early to be able, or is it in a cost center? I mean, I'm sure it's there someplace.
When we started doing our unscheduled needs list, we knew that we had to collect information for each one of them. And so we created something called a project identification form, which for each one of the, and you've seen those before,
Oh, yeah.
they're like miniature planning studies. And some of the important questions they ask on there are, what are the human and natural environmental impacts of doing something in this area? So that information is collected. It doesn't seem to be within the mechanism of SHIFT. And I know that when we were doing the black box, it really wasn't in there either. And that's where that's going to be very important.
But it could be, we can use that section that talks about the 15% for the
Yes,
local.
yes.
The locals will know the impacts a little bit better than the people set up in Frankfurt or district sometimes.
Right.
But we plan on using that for that human element and that
Right,
other.
right. That's that other 2/3 of the input are those points.
Whether you like this or not, it's going to be in place. So
Yes.
we're going to use it to the best of our abilities.
But also have feedback. You know, when we were doing the black box or any of the other prioritizations, we did postmortems. Transportation Unit did postmortems and said, okay, what worked? You know, what worked and what didn't work. So, you know, get feedback and say, yeah, this generated good scores, and these matched up with the projects I thought they were going to match up with. Okay, cool. Or if they were off center, then why? Maybe each of those, going back to the gears and circles, maybe one of them needs more weight to it than the other, kind of thing. I know that's one of the things they played with in the black box is how do you weight each one of the gears.
Maybe you can touch on the funding sources, because that's been kind of a shell game, I think, in Frankfurt. Like what funding is put to what projects, and we know when we look at it like that project's dead.
Yeah.
It's got that funding, it's not going anywhere. But sometimes even I don't think all the elected officials know.
Well, there's a little code beside this.
Right.
SP or SPP. And if it's SP, that means it's in there, it's a nice project and so forth. SPP, you got a better chance of,
Right.
it's been funded.
It's a state-funded, SPP is state-funded project priority.
Priority.
Mhm. And then SP is, well, it's on the list. and it's a
And hopefully
it's a
that
layover.
disappears a little bit with the
Yeah,
shift
that's what we're
process.
hoping. Because we've always wrestled in the prioritization process, even in the early days of okay, we're adding, our discussion is about new stuff. Shouldn't we ask the community, because it's been 2 years, shouldn't we ask them that they're still cool with what's on the 6-year plan?
We do that at the local
Yes,
level.
yes, now, yeah. And I was always really good about it at my district level, because I felt like Guys, before we even talk about what new stuff we need to talk about and make certain that everything else is still on track. Another question?
Okay, so we're gonna break for lunch. If you go right out this door, there's a lunch is set up here in the back. And we'll just come back and then Karen will start once everybody gets in place for lunch. Thanks, Jeff.
Thank you.
So I'm going to talk a little bit about how projects go, more like in the future, how projects are going to be introduced into the SHIFT process and what the roles are for local planning commission, city councils, even just the general, stakeholders to help that process along. And then we talk a little bit about the comp plan and then talk about public involvement and kind of give you our take on the importance of public involvement and what can be done. So projects for the 6-year plan. Talked a little while ago about the unscheduled needs list. So there is a slew of projects. Nelson County, I think, has a good handle on their unscheduled needs list, but we were talking about some of the MPOs, the Louisville TICTA, the Louisville MPO, their director said, we're not moving forward with any of this prioritization project until you clean up your unscheduled needs list because the list has just gotten out of hand, So the counties that were all involved with TICTA MPO really went through a lengthy process trying to figure out what still needed to be on there because you're talking about projects that are almost 20 years old in some cases and people didn't even realize why the projects were there. They already had a problem with the 6-year plan in that they go through this whole process, been going through this process for years, and then the recommended plan has projects that just pop up, and transportation cabinet planners and engineers, they look at and go, what is this project? They've never heard about it before. It's one of their roads that apparently has a problem that they don't know about. So they have to do a lot of investigating to figure out, is this even the right location? What is the problem? A lot of times it's what I consider to be like an emotionally charged project that gets there. There's been a serious crash and someone thinks, well, if you studied that intersection, maybe no one else goes through this crash, even though the intersection may not have any real problems. So next go around, what's really going to be important, number one is the comprehensive plan, the transportation on the comprehensive plan. It's going to be huge in the future as far as getting projects into the SHIFT process. What's so important about the comp plan is that it's already a publicly supported document. So it carries more weight because it's kind of embedded through local officials, it's embedded through the public, and you've got that support behind it. The other things that can help are other publicly supported plans. So after the comp plan has been approved, if there are other projects that come about, maybe because of development that occurs, those projects should also get the support. You may have projects that are in a study phase and an alignment's been approved. So those are projects that need to be pushing forward to get more of the future phases like Jeff was talking about. So you got to make the plan, but you need to be staying on it. Make sure you're getting design, construction, the right of way, utilities. Of course, working through the Lincoln Trail Area Development District Committee to get projects on there, making sure that your representatives are they know why these projects are important. And then again, with the state representatives, because sometimes those projects don't get on the list and should have been. So I don't know what the future is going to be with SHIFT, but there still may be an opportunity to get projects on at the last minute. So I'll tell you just a little bit about the comprehensive plan and where those projects are coming from. I'm sure many of you already know this, but with the updated comprehensive plan, of course, everything that's in the Kentucky 6-year plan should be a comprehensive plan. Things that are going in now, the things that are in there right now that are not completed projects, the unscheduled needs list. Barstow was really, I guess, fortunate that they had a small urban area study done. The project's a little dated now, but a lot of good projects come out of that. Gives at least ideas on transportation improvements, and then any other local plans. And this is just a snapshot of the projects that have been recommended to move forward into a highway plan. And I know you can't read that, so I did take a snapshot of what those projects are. So you've got a Louisville Road project, you've got the Southwest Connector, you've got widening Springfield Road, moving projects from the Springfield Road project forward, widening 245 from Flagey to the county line, and then widening Templin. And then I took just a snapshot of what's on the unscheduled projects list that is on the Area Development District's website. That's just one page of actually the Nelson County projects. I really want to get together, so I'm kind of going through this fast. The comp plan talked about the smaller urban area study that was done. I don't think the state has done probably more than a dozen of these, so I'd say it's a nice opportunity, it really was. One thing that's said in the comprehensive plan, though, and I quoted about how any corridor studies or plans should be adopted as addenda to the comprehensive plan, and overlay zoning districts should be adopted and implemented to ensure compliance with corridor studies and to ensure compatible and managed growth and development along the roadway corridors. One thing that really makes this important is that when we come into a community and we are working on a transportation study, comp plan, we look at that and say, well, we can't change the comp plan. So if the comp plan is recommending certain areas for improvement, or if the comp plan says this land use, we think this is going to be industrial, this is going to be commercial, those are things that we're going to be taking into serious consideration as we move forward with alignment. So it's really important that whatever changes, whatever vision that you can capture in your comp plan, that you're doing so, and you're doing those addenda, so that when other transportation studies are done, you've got kind of the weight of the comp plan to stand behind to say, this is what we said we wanted, and what you're proposing goes against it. So next I want to jump into basically how to actively participate in existing projects. That's so important to us. We go to a lot of meetings, and I know Nelson County probably has better attendance in a lot of places, but a lot of times we don't get like elected officials to come out to meetings. We don't get really a good representation. Maybe we'll get the landowners if they think their project or property is going to be impacted. But it's really important that we have very active participation, that the state knows projects are important or are not important if you don't want them. So things that we recommend is, of course, serving on a stakeholder committee, and I'll talk a minute about what really composes a stakeholder committee. Sometimes we have what we call a citizen advisory committee. That's especially if you have an area that is heavily impacted or made up of, let's say, business owners. Maybe your advisory committee is the business owners, or it has a lot of different different subdivisions that could be impacted. We want to make sure that we're getting representation from each subdivision. The other thing is to recommend people to be on these stakeholder committees. Lots of times we don't get very good representation. We get a name and that person gets invited, but we don't see much of them. Or maybe they're just not the right person because they're showing up, but they're not talking in any of these meetings, so we're not getting really enough input from them. And then, of course, when there is a public meeting, doing everything you can to promote it, to make sure people are showing up to share your views. And then we've got here what the 5 I's public involvement are. And one is to identify who should be involved, who's your public, who you're really trying to reach out to. The invite, make sure that you're getting the word out to everyone, that you get plenty of time, using whatever resources available to make sure they know that there's a meeting coming up, informing them of the meeting, making sure they understand the full scope of the project and what you're trying to accomplish, involving them, making sure that whatever type of activities or presentation are going on at a public meeting, it's not just You have someone coming and telling you what they want to do and leaving, to make sure there's lots of activities to involve everyone. And then keep working to improve that. So, we'll go through one series of meetings and think, okay, what didn't work so well, what did work so well, what are we going to do different with the next round of meetings. Some of the people that we like to see on our stakeholder committees, of course, county judge, mayors, anytime that we can get state reps, senators there, that's always a good thing so that they can engage with the public and understand why the project's important. Of course, city county engineers and planning directors. We talked about the fact that now economic development is really important for projects. Is this project going to help economic development? So it's important to get someone who represents industrial boards or the economic development directors there. Chamber reps lots of times get really good information there as well. Almost any project today, we love to talk to the transportation directors. Even if the project's not near a school, you have buses going on the roads. Lots of times the better transportation directors will reach out to their drivers to find out what their concerns are and what issues they may have on a certain corridor, and that's gold. I always like to talk to emergency management directors and emergency responders, kind of for the same reason, because when they're responding to a crash, or if it's talking about ambulances trying to get to hospitals, they've got great stories and can really give a lot of detailed information about how important it is to have a good roadway system in place and where they're having problems during routine calls. Great to have someone who knows the historic properties. Hospitals, kind of for the same reason as the ambulance, they can tell us, why or what problems they perceive as far as people getting to the hospital in a timely manner. Property owners, there's different ways to involve them. You can have a citizens group that's more made up of residential residents. We tend to, if there's a lot of properties involved, try to do something with properties, a lot of commercial properties involved, try to do something with the business owners so they understand exactly what the project may or may not do for them. Sometimes we'll have just a few representatives, like a major property owner or major business. And then I talked a little bit a while ago about the citizen advisory rep, which would be maybe neighborhood groups. So you have a person representing a neighborhood. This is kind of a standard process that we go through in terms of the public involvement project, or public involvement participation on a project. So we have our first round of meetings, which is just to figure out what the issues are. We may think we already know when we show up, and we may think we know exactly what the solution should be, but we try to go with a blank slate and have people tell us what are the issues, what is the study area, where should it be, what should the limits be. We look for the public to come in and say that's not right. You should at least have gone this far. You should consider expanding it, narrowing it, whatever the case may be. Transportation issues, we usually will come in and say, well, how many cars are using the various roads and how many trucks are using the roads. But we want to hear your stories too. We want to know, are you having serious problems at certain locations? We can model a roadway system, but we don't necessarily know that it takes you 10 minutes to get out of your driveway, or to be able to make a left turn is nearly impossible on certain routes. Sometimes those things don't get modeled so well, so it's always great to get lots of stories. We had no accounts of near misses. We don't have accounts of really all the crashes, because lots of times there will be fender benders and there's no report, so we only get a snapshot. Also, we get a snapshot, or we take a snapshot in time. So there are roads I know, when I'm driving around here, that I think instinctively this is a bad road to be on, and I really need to be more careful, because I'm thinking of what happened, 30 years ago, 40 years ago, but it's still in my head that this is not a safe road to be on. So it's good to hear some of those stories, and so we're not just stuck with 3 or 5 years worth of crash data that we're looking at. So if people know and can share their stories about why they're concerned, why they think a road's not safe, it's really good to have that to kind of augment our own studies. And we also go through there's a question about the environmental. So on that first day, we asked, what are the environment? Is there something sensitive here that we need to know about? Most times we're looking at maps. We're not actually out in the field walking corridors, so we're not seeing everything. So we'll take everything from that first public meeting. We'll go away. We'll come back with a bunch of alternatives and present those alternatives at that second set of meetings. The meetings often will go through stakeholder group first. We'll tell them here's what we think the alternatives should be. We'll get some input from them, and then we'll go to the public meeting. If a project is going through multiple jurisdictions or a couple jurisdictions, we may have a local officials meeting. So we would go out first with the local officials and say, here's what we think the problems are, here's what we think the solutions are, get some input, fine tune, go to the stakeholders, fine tune a little bit more, and then go out to the public. And the third meeting is when we come back and say, well, we showed you all these alternatives, here's our recommendation, or here's our group of recommendations, and we'll get more input. Occasionally, we have to go a fourth time because we come out and say, ta-da, here's what we think you should do, and people go, no. So that's always an option. Did I miss anything?
No, I was just saying, yeah, they'll come out with some stuff.
Yeah, doesn't happen very often, but
It does happen. Or something, in that process, it takes a while, so something can happen. All of a sudden, a new school is going to be plopped down in the middle of that proposed corridor or along that roadway. So that makes your data, you gotta go back and go, oh, we need to rethink this. So, you're talking about a process here that can run 6 months, depending on the complexity of the process. It can be 6 months up to a year,
right.
just to do the planning.
Nothing. So I thought to kind of talk through, I'm going to have an example project that's probably near and dear to a lot of hearts around here, but the Southwest Connector.
Or is everybody familiar with what we're calling the Southwest Connector, which will be 245 to 62?
This project is being led by the Transportation Cabinet's District 4 office in E-Town. It was a planning project. The info I'm getting is that it's kind of moved over into the Highway Design Group. The Transportation Cabinet has recently decided to keep their design work in-house and just use consultants for certain portions of it. So they may have consultants come in and help them with the public involvement, help them with environmental things that they don't feel like they can do as well in-house. This is the latest news. It could all change, and it could be a consultant that does everything, or it could be them doing everything in-house themselves.
So we've seen a project, it's smaller in scale than the Southwest Connector, but the Horse Cave Connector went this way, where the design is kept in-house in the district. The public involvement of the environmental went out on the street to consultants. So, we're going to, that's a new model. It'll be interesting to see how it works.
Yeah. But the public involvement process should be the same, whether it's completely handled by the cabinet, completely handled by the consultant, or some sort of mix of the two. So what we would anticipate for the project, the first thing they'll do is they'll put together a couple of groups. They'll put together their study team, which will be the District 4 staff, it will be the consultants, it will be Federal Highways, probably someone from the ad. So it's more of the technical team, the leadership, and then they'll put together their stakeholder committee. And they'll be relying probably fairly heavily on their planning person as well as consultants to come up with a list of everyone they think should be on that list of stakeholders. That's definitely somewhere where I think it's important to try to get engaged early on to say, well, I want to be, or I want you to have this person on that stakeholders committee to make sure that it's the right people that are on there. If groups sometimes get left off would be like industrial, economic development, sometimes they're an afterthought. The school may or may not be included, it just depends on who's handling the project. That's what I said, it's really good I've paid a list of everyone that could possibly be, that's not, there's maybe some other handful of people that you can think of locally that could really add some good insight. So, like I said, when those groups are formed, it's important to make those recommendations. You could also have potentially some people representing the neighborhoods that may be affected by this. They'll probably do the exact same thing that I was talking about. They'll schedule 3 or 4 meetings, same format. They will look to locals like Janet to say, where should we have this? What makes sense? What's the best place? What's going to get people to come to the meeting? When should we have it? That's a biggie right there, because if there's something to have a meeting with that coincides with something else, we love to go in like we have PTA meetings because if the project's affecting schools, it's great to capture all those parents before they take off and get some input. Sometimes it's county fairs. It just all depends. How to do that at county fair, you can get a lot of good information. I've said numerous times my best public meeting occurred in front of a Walmart, and that was for a countywide plan, but we set up a booth. We had our little duck pond thing. Kids get the duck pond, parents fill out survey forms, and we got a lot of great input onto a countywide plan that way. So,
But you also want to make certain that you can piggyback on the community events, that helps too. But like the Bourbon Festival, that's not a good time to do your public meeting. If there's, or we had one project we were working on, and we were going to schedule the meeting, but it was a big cross-town rivalry basketball game that night. Or we've had small communities that said, "Oh, that's UK's playing. Forget that." So you've got to be sensitive to what you can do to include as many people as possible, but also not schedule it where everybody else is going to be somewhere else and not be able to come to the meeting.
yeah, we gotta watch the games, so I'll have to check game schedules.
Yes.
Game schedules and church schedules. Okay, so the next part of the public involvement, talk about the 3 plans, or the 3 steps and what they are. I didn't really go into a lot of the purpose and need, but after that first meeting, we'll talk about the different issues, we'll get lots of information. We just did a corridor study, the first round of meetings a month ago, and used different exercises to kind of capture the information. So we had probably hundreds of comments to go through. We take all of that and try to revise the purpose and need statement. The purpose and need statement is really important. It's one of those things that doesn't give, people don't give it a lot of weight. They don't even really read it, I don't think, half the time. What happens is we put together a purpose and need statement based on what you tell us the issues are, and then we develop alternatives and go, does this meet purpose and need? And then come back with a final recommendation, say, does this meet purpose and need? Jeff and I worked on a project quite some time ago where we got to the end of the project and said,
None of the alternatives.
these don't meet it. This project's going to be so disruptive, it's going to really hurt people who live along the corridor, and we ended up recommending a no-build alternative because it didn't meet any of the purpose and needs. Now, maybe if we had a different purpose and need, we did have folks coming out afterwards going, what? You're not building? It was an interchange project, and they were quite upset. It was a church that was quite upset because they didn't have access.
Can I ask you a question, please?
Sure.
Is your company currently involved in this southwest
No,
project? Okay.
it hasn't been advertised.
I knew you had approached that before.
I wish, but no.
It's not been advertised.
And I'm just using that as an example.
Okay.
So whoever
I
gets to
asked her
produce
to put
something.
that as the example.
Okay.
I could have pulled something else, or I could have just called it,
If you hadn't come see me, I would have known that.
So are we in this active participation and development of existing, the alternatives here?
Yeah.
Where are we at this project?
The project hasn't been even started by the cabinet yet. They have funding for it, and they could start it any day, depending on whether they want to involve consultants or not. If they want to do it in-house, they could start it tomorrow. If they want to bring consultants, I say tomorrow. There is a process where they have to go to actually release the funds, but the study is funded. So, a year ago, they told me it was going to happen any day now, so that's state timetables, right?
Yeah. Well, and you have to work through the scope of work and other issues that slow you down a little bit. But yeah, you're at the, you can start putting together your plan on how to approach it, on putting together your list of who needs to be involved in the discussion, and when are good times to have public meetings, or how's the best way to communicate in the community. Is it the newspaper? Is it the radio? Is it all media? Is it social media? That's a good exercise for the community to do right now, even before it gets started, so that when the cabinet and the consultant comes to you and says, okay, we're ready to start, you can say, okay, you need to make certain you do this, this, and this, because this is the best way to interface with us.
But Judge, this could be also for the 150 project too, right?
It could be any of
Because
them.
that'll be a project that's going to occur faster.
Well, for any of these,
For any of
any of the
Anything,
projects, really.
yes, anything. And that's why the comp plan is your kind of to-do list, your universe of needs, the transportation element of it. So it's really good to have those things kind of very collaborative.
And the state's done that, Dan, on the 150 project.
They did, yeah, they had meetings
about
out
2 or
at
3
yeah,
meetings.
Springfield, or the Parkway Baptist.
And that should be, it should be almost identical process. I mean, you can obviously do better or worse depending on how much input they put into it. But yeah, it should follow that. And again, I just want to make sure that everyone understands the purpose and need, because you get to projects and you get to the end of it and it doesn't meet those. So, for example, economic development is a part of a purpose and need statement, or it's not. That could really decide whether a project moves forward or where it moves forward. What kind of, like in something like this, where is the alignment, if that's a problem? If the purpose and need says we want to reduce congestion on Templin, that could affect your alternatives. There's just a lot of different things. If getting to the hospital faster, if getting to the schools are faster. So you can see how purpose and need can really change the outcome of what the alternatives are going to be. So.
But the other thing too is connecting it to our land use plan.
Yes.
So wherever that alignment would be, the planning commission and city council and fiscal court need to be on top of changing that land use plan either before, during, or after. Because one of the things for zone change is, has there been a major economic change in the area? We want to be at the beginning of that and saying, this is where we think the alignment's going to be, and this is what that land use is going to be along that alignment. And what is the purpose of this road? Is it to move traffic and freight, or is it to be a commercial corridor? So that's the question for the community, is what is that corridor
Or it
going
could
to
be
be?
a combination of both.
Or a combination
Look
of both.
at Ring Road in Elizabethtown, when it's turned.
Yeah.
But we want to be able to answer that at the intersection of 62, what's that corridor going to be at that intersection? What's it going to be like along the corridor? And then what's going to happen at 245? And so we have to be able to address that in future land use planning, probably in the next 6 months as we look at it, so we can anticipate land use proposals along there. Because as we know, people are going to be prospective and come in with zone changes, thinking, well, that's where the road's going to go. That'd be a great place for a commercial center, or it's a great place for industrial, and we need to be ahead of the game and anticipate what we want to do, because land use affects transportation and transportation affects land use. So we want to be together on this.
And to underline the importance of what Karen's saying about purpose and need, I talked about deliverables, that's the first deliverable that will be put together in that project or that study will be the purpose and need. And they'll roll it out and say, is this correct? You need to give input. Yes. Does
So if
this?
that's an area that we think that's going to be industrial growth, and we want to be able to move that freight through there, we want to be able to move
And if that purpose and
jobs.
need doesn't reflect freight, then you say, hey, where's freight in here, or access to schools.
Or land use, because we just
yeah.
did another corridor study where, supporting the land use was one of the, part of the purpose and need. So.
And it's a statement, not an essay, because you want it clear, you want it concise, so that when someone comes up to you and says, why are you doing the project, you can tell them about 2 sentences. And it communicates well. It goes back to the communication element of this.
It's usually good to get around 3 things again.
The 3 things. Too many things, they're not going to remember.
Then I already talked about the second round meetings again, just talking about those scenarios, going back and saying, do these meet our purpose and need? And if you haven't got that purpose and need right, that usually doesn't change through the course of the study, because purpose and need, go out to the public, say, do you all want this as your purpose and need? If no one says, and they don't normally comment much at all about purpose and need, if stakeholder groups, local official groups, and public don't say it needs to be changed, then it's probably not going to get changed. And you're going to get through the alternatives and to the recommendation, and that's when people that are going, whoa, we don't want this isn't right, and
Or it should be doing this. It's like, wait a minute.
Without a purpose and need, there's no warning. If you don't have a purpose and need, it should never be brought up in the first place.
Exactly.
right. But if you don't have all of the needs outlined, yeah, then it may not turn out to be exactly the project you thought it might be, or. And then at public meetings, I talked about some of this already, but what can you do? The big thing is, at public meetings, we tend to have several people on the consultant team. There may be several people from transportation cabinet that come, and everyone's roaming around, listening to people talk. And one of the best things you can do is, go talk to one person, and then go tell the other person, and then go tell another. Talk to more than one person, even if you're telling them the same thing. Because what's going to happen is we're going to all get together afterwards and say, so what did you hear? And I'll, just like last week, Jeff, or last month, it's like, well, this one person was saying that this area is going to develop and it's going to be a huge problem because there's some apartments going in here. And he's like, yeah, I talked to someone also who's really concerned about that. And third person saying, yeah, someone told me about that too. Well, it may not have been three someones, but the point got across.
Well, you got a consistent message that way too.
Yes, we make sure it's getting back to the people that need to hear it and people who are likely to hear it, so.
And there's lots of different conduits for capturing information at those meetings. There are, actual talking to someone and someone's writing it down on a white paper, a board, or easel. There's that. There's maps that are laid out. People are putting Post-it notes or stickers. There are sticker dots. There's a survey. Do them all.
Yeah.
They're all out there. Do them all, because we're looking at that information. And in Plano, we did that. We had people that filled it out online. They came to the public meeting and then also provided their information again, because it helps. A lot of dealing with the public is you're trying to not only discover new things about the project that you might have missed, you're also trying to validate your assumptions. You're trying to say, here's what we think you all are wanting. Are we right?
I can't hear too much really, and I talked about just sharing what are the safety and the capacity concerns, because we get a lot of information from stories that you really just can't document. Things like, getting back to the project that Jeff was talking about, they're telling us about all the kids and their bikes ride in this one area and how they've had some near misses with the bikes and cars. Well, traffic data doesn't tell us that there are kids out on bikes on these roads. So we need as many stories as we can possibly get. They don't tell us, usually, like if the car keeps running, maybe they run off the road, maybe they get back on the road. But you have cars that are slipping off. Sometimes you're slipping off and they call someone and pull them out of the ditch. Well, police don't report that. They never know that there is a problem like that. We can ride up and down and say, this is kind of narrow lane, but we don't know that that's a real problem unless we can actually see, the ruts in the
Karen
road.
just brought up a really interesting point. Y'all were asking about if a purpose and need could change. Say the purpose and need for the Plano Road project was about moving motor vehicles along the corridor. Well, we go to the public meeting and the purpose and need says, this is for the safety and mobility of cars. That's a real general
That happens.
purpose and need. But then we come to find out, but there's these bicycles, or there's a need for sidewalks. Is that reflected in my purpose and need? Not currently. So then that would be an adjustment that we need to go back and say, hey, we're hearing that there's this other need out here for sidewalks or a shared use lane for bikes and for pedestrians. So that would be something we would make into a change in the purpose and need. Because when it comes down to when we start grading these alternatives to see which one meets the purpose and need, or in those discussions, the public comes out and says, hey, we want a shared use path on this project. And we look at the purpose and need, it's like, but this is supposed to move cars. It didn't address pedestrians and bicycles, so we missed it. So that's a really important interlocking there between the public input and your purpose and need, of how that can really change your purpose and need and add something else into it. It's part of that discovery or validation.
And we had, at the same meeting, we had someone telling us that there's a stop sign that people are just driving through. So they're driving onto this corridor, they're missing the stop sign, driving through. Well, we can see that there's crashes occurring there, but we don't know it's because necessarily that for some reason people are just not noticing the stop sign. So, like I said, all those stories really help, and a lot of times when we get those stories and we hear that there's problems, we can go back to the district and say, that's a problem right there, and they send someone out immediately to address it. They don't even wait until the study's done. If they have, funds to go out and do those minor improvements, they'll take care of them instead of, waiting until a study is published a year later to take care of safety issues. So it's great to get those stories. I mentioned access management. That's a biggie because models don't really do a good job with access management. They really don't. We'll see some of it just driving out and spending time during the peak hours, being out there in the mornings when the sports is going on, being there in the afternoons. But seeing how difficult it is just to pull out on certain streets, it's always great to hear. And again, that's a general corridor, not necessarily come up the Southwest Connector, but any corridor state, you want to know that I can get on my driveway from this time to this time, or at this intersection that it's not signalized. It's so hard for us to get out. Whatever you can tell us, it really helps. The last one I talked about too is by encouraging people to attend, because big crowds really do get noticed at the state. The state shows up and there's not much of a crowd and say this project isn't important, and they're not going to care about it as much. See a big crowd, it tells them this is something that this community really wants, and they really kind of get psyched up about working on it and helping it move forward. So you really want to.
Because we'll always hear from the people that are in opposition. They'll come out of the woodwork. But and some people will, I support the project, it's good, I don't need to go to public meeting. That's dangerous. We need to see that support because it's going to be that return on investment. If the community's not coming out and all the voices that we heard at that public meeting was negative, then we're probably going to go back and go, maybe they really don't want this. So it's important that there's a good balance of both the opposition and the support. Make sure your support is there.
We'll run into that when I talk about having more than 3 meetings. We've had that problem where you go, you share your issues, and everyone's like, yes, 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 we want it. And then we've had an article that says public support is great, and you show up the next one, and your room's full of people that are like, no, don't do this. We don't want this. Leave this alone. We like our road like it is, and so we ended up having to go, 3rd time. So we make sure that we're getting good representation on both sides. Big crowds are great in this. This kind of goes back to what I just said too, though, is to discuss the alignment options as best you can, whether you're filling out the forms, getting all the details. Jeff talked about who's going to show up. When we start talking about alignments, we tend to get the property owners are more heavily represented than anyone else. People that are using the corridors are the ones who typically aren't showing up. The ones who are going to be benefiting because they're driving them every day. They just kind of expect that you guys will take care of making sure that the consultants or the state know exactly what needs to be done. And then I mentioned earlier, you can get state officials there. It's always a good thing.
Well, yeah, they control the purse strings, plus they see what their constituents want too,
Yes.
one way or the other, and that's going to help.
Right.
I appreciate Senator Higgins being here today at this meeting.
Yeah, and I think that opportunity to talk one-on-one, and then also to get the projects not just moving into the future funding phases is just huge too. So once the recommendation is made, it really doesn't end because it still needs to go through the shift process. You've got for example, with Southwest Corridor, the planning study is funded, but having the plan doesn't get you a road. There's a lot more to it than that. So making sure that everyone knows that this project is really important, that you wanted to get into the design phase, that the money is there. I mentioned encouraging the timely completion because we talked about this 2-year cycle. So really, you're a year and a half away from getting projects that are being considered for not the upcoming, but the next 2-year period. So a year and a half from now, you almost need a recommendation if you're hoping to get it into the next, getting designed into the next 6-year plan. So it's really important to pushing the projects, pushing the transportation cabinet if you can, to stay on the ball and get projects done quickly and not drag projects out. So, you want to get this in a year and a half, or you want to get it in 2 years, or you want to get it in 4 years. It's a big wait, so. Anything to add to that? That was your slide, but about the
Well,
general process.
it goes into what Karen was saying, is this is a cycle. This is one of Mike Hancock's sketches, and we turned it into a visualization for our long-range plan. Is we call it our circle of life, because it starts out with a vision, you go into planning, and then you have processes. You have planning and then design, where lines are actually being put on the map after alternatives have been selected. And then you go to construction, and then you got to take care of the animal. That's the operations. You got to maintain both the structure as well as the traffic along through there. And then projects have life. You're going to probably go back and be having that discussion again. That's one of the things I always teach when I talk about public involvement. Is they're like, oh well, we're done. We're going to do this public meeting on this project, and we'll come in here, we'll do it, and we'll ride out of town on our white horse. And I always say, no, you need to conduct your business, your interaction with the community, in anticipation that one of these days you're going to come back. You're going to come back to them and stir up again. So always treat them very well. Always include them, because that circle will just keep coming around. And if you're not careful, it will come around and bite you in the butt. Because I really warn my engineers, like, oh, we'll never go back to Monroe County again. We'll just do this public meeting. We're good. It's like, you will always be back to Monroe. You'll always be back to Nelson. These are your neighbors. Okay, treat them that way, and then build those relationships. So when they see you come in again, it's like, oh, okay, we kind of know what the process is. We're going to work with you.
That's a good visual too. We could have had kind of the time frame on it too, where the vision is kind of already out there. That was part of your comp plan. The planning phase hopefully will start, if not in the summer, start in the fall. Ideally, it's like a year and a half, so you're being able to put the projects into the next 6-year plan, so you get the design money. That's probably another year and a half wait before design starts, and so you'll a longer wait for design to be complete and construction money to appear, unless both phases get money at the same time, which is possible.
And what's within all of those blue arrows is that purpose and need. The purpose and need just doesn't vanish after you finish your planning study. It should be something that is communicated all the way, even to operation.
Yeah, and it does happen, there are projects that part of that was, let's say, multimodal corridor, and then, have these times where you have to cut back on projects and figuring out, okay, what are we gonna do to save money on this? And, when it's multimodal, sidewalks can go, trails are one of the first things people start thinking about cutting. But if it was part of the purpose and need, maybe you're still getting a trail on one side. You may not be getting everything you're wanting, but it's harder to cut out something that's part of the purpose and need.
And that sometimes can happen all the way into construction. You may lose something.
That's our last slide. Yep, our last slide.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thanks.
So I'd like to thank Karen and Jeff. I asked them to do this after the spring conference, the Kentucky chapter of American Planning. This was done at the spring conference, and I had to miss it because I had to do ethics and law and get all the other things I had to have. So I asked them to, it was presented there, and so I asked them to come today and do this, and they offered it to us free, so that was nice. And county elected officials, Bernard and Dina, I've requested training credit for you all through DLG, so hopefully that will get approved. And then, of course, the planning commissioners get credit too, and staff. So, but thank you very much. I appreciate it. And I'm sure they'll answer any questions or stay for a while if you want to talk about some of our projects that are up on the list. And we'll be working on the plan soon, so we'll be getting with you on the future land use plan. So, thank you very much.